Hello fellow YouTubers, I'm Cassandra Joy and welcome to my channel. I thought I'd change things up a little bit and do a sit-down chat video. I haven't done one of those in a while. The topic being books. More specifically, books I love so much that I reread them every year. I know a lot of you are fellow bookworms, so you will totally understand when I say that there are some books that are one and done. You read them, you put them down, you never really think about them again. Or you disliked them so much that you put them down never to pick them up again, but you think about them all the time for a very different reason. We've all had that experience. Then there are books. It transported you to somewhere. It made you feel something. A plot twist or a surprise ending blew your mind. The writing spoke to you. A character felt like a friend. The trope made you feel like jumping inside the book and becoming a character yourself. No matter what the reason, there's always a book or two we choose to read over our growing TBR list because we loved it that much that we want to relive it all over again. That's what we're going to talk about today. Books that I love so much, I reread them on a yearly basis. We're gonna get the most obvious choice out of the way. Harry Potter. I picked up the Sorcerer's Stone off my shelf, but honestly, it could be any of the books in the series. This particular copy I picked up when I was in Ireland all those years ago during their 20-year anniversary of Harry Potter Magic. The bookstore that I went to had special edition books that were Hogwarts house themed. So being a Ravenclaw, I obviously picked up this. It's beautiful, and apparently you can buy the rest of the series in this style. It's just a little expensive, I won't lie. And because I bought it in Ireland, it says the Philosopher's Stone as opposed to the Sorcerer's Stone, which I thought was a really cool detail. But I think for a lot of us, Harry Potter is just one of those stories that we dip our toes into again and again and again, trying to relive or recapture the magic of that first read. I know when I read Harry Potter for the first time, it transported me completely. I was thoroughly invested in the characters. I was immersed in a world that was both real enough to be believable and fantastical enough to be an escape. So usually around fall time, I find myself picking up this book again and re-entering the magic that is Harry Potter. I didn't bother reading the back. I feel like we all know what Harry Potter's about, what the plot is, but for the rest of these I will give a summary so that you can know what kind of book it is and maybe pick up a copy for yourself. This next book is a copy that I don't think many people have heard of, although it was endorsed by J.K. Rowling. It's called The Little White Horse. I vividly remember finding this on a shelf in Barnes & Noble and picking it up for myself. This was during the time where I was choosing my own books, I was buying my own books, that early stage of figuring out what kind of books you like to read. You can tell it's very well loved. It has tape, it has very worn edges, an ancient post-it bookmark, a few rips and tears along the cover, which hopefully gives you an idea of how often I return to this book. This has survived an ocean wave. That's right, the tide came in really quick while we were all sunbathing on vacation and my book almost got claimed by the ocean. I was able to rescue it, but it's never quite looked the same since. This is by Elizabeth Gouge or Gouge, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. As I said, J.K. Rowling endorsed this book with the quote, "I absolutely adored The Little White Horse." Very simple, very straightforward, but if she says she adored it, you know it has to be good, which is part of the reason why I picked it up. I've been a horse girl all my life. I love horses in all their variants, so when I saw a unicorn stamped on the cover, I was instantly intrigued. And then I read the back and I knew I needed to buy it. A new fashion story that is as wonderful as the best fairy tales. When orphaned young Maria Merriweather arrives at Moonacre Manor, she feels as if she's entered paradise. Her new guardian, her uncle Sir Benjamin, is kind and funny. The manor itself feels like home right away, and every person and animal she meets is like an old friend. But there is something incredibly sad beneath all of this beauty and comfort. A tragedy that happened years ago, shadowing Moonacre Manor and the town around it. And Maria is determined to learn about it, change it, and give her own life story a happy ending. But what can one solitary girl do? This book feels like a fairy tale. Not a Grimm Brothers fairy tale that's dark and twisted, but a light, magical, immersive experience. The writing was enchanting. The detail with which the author described the environment was fully immersive. The author painted such a convincing picture that I think this was one of the first books that I chose myself, that when I stopped reading, I felt like I was coming up for air. I felt like I was re-emerging from being underwater for a long time. It was that engaging, which was an experience I hadn't really had before. I liked books and I would read them and I'd enjoy them, but they weren't all-encompassing like this one was. I highly recommend this if you like a light fairy tale with a happy ending. It's beautiful and enchanting and everything you'd want in a read. Next is a book called The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. As you can see, I took the slipcover off. I've lost it long ago. Slipcovers annoy me a lot. So I got rid of it and I couldn't tell you where it is. In the same way The Little White Horse was all-encompassing, this book has lived rent-free in my mind from the second I finished it. I don't know how to explain it in a way that will convince you to read it, but by the time I read page 5, I was fully engaged and committed to this story. It's about a woman named Margaret Lee who lives above a bookshop. Her parents technically own it, but she's the caretaker. She's the kind of person that feels sorry for all the books that never get read, so she'll pick them up at random and read just a sentence or two to sort of breathe life back into books that someone out there worked so hard to write. Her life is comfortable but relatively boring, just passing time between one book read and the next, until she receives a mysterious letter. The letter, I don't mind admitting, is what made me buy the book. Just to explain, if anybody doesn't know my method of deciding whether or not I want a book, I have a 3, maybe 4-step process. I completely judge a book by the cover. Guilty, I fully admit it. I'm a very visual person and that's what engages me most. Or a title. A title is a close second. Then I open the book and I read the first sentence. If the first sentence grabs me, I'll read the first paragraph. If the first paragraph grabs me, I'll read the first page. And if I'm sucked in by the first page, I buy the book. I also read the back of the cover, but I think everybody does that. The letter is from a world-renowned writer who is not known just for her books and how amazing they are, but also for her interviews, because not once during any interview does she ever tell the truth. People will ask her about her personal life, ask her about her history, who she is, where she comes from, how did she become a writer, and the reason people love interviewing her is because the answer is different every time. Let me read a bit of the letter because that will explain it better than I can. This also takes place in England, so I am going to do an English accent. Just so you know. I once did an interview for the Banbury Herald. I must look it out one of these days for the biography. Strange chap they sent me. A boy really. As tall as a man, but with the puppy fat of youth. There was something in his manner, an intensity. The moment I set eyes on him I thought, what's he after? I've nothing against people who love truth, apart from the fact that they make dull companions, just so long as they don't start on about storytelling and honesty the way some of them do. Naturally, that annoys me, but provided they leave me alone, I won't hurt them. My gripe is not with lovers of the truth, but with truth herself. What succour, what consolation is there in truth compared to a story? What good is truth at midnight in the dark, when the wind is roaring like a beast in the chimney, when the lightning strikes shadows on the bedroom wall, and the rain taps at the window with its long fingernails, when fear and cold make a statue of you in your bed? Don't expect hard-boned and fleshless truth to come running to your aid. What you need are the plump comforts of a story, the soothing, rocking safety of a lie. That paragraph right there has stayed with me from the moment I read it. I give dozens of interviews a year, hundreds over the course of a lifetime. In the early years, they used to try to catch me out. They would do research, come along with a little piece of truth concealed in their pocket, draw out an appropriate moment and hope to startle me into revealing more. I had to be careful, inch them in the direction I wanted them to take, use my bait to draw them gently, imperceptibly toward a prettier story than the one they had their eye on. Their eyes would start to shine, and their grasp on the little chip of truth would loosen until it dropped from their hand and fell, disregarded, by the wayside. It never failed. A good story is always more dazzling than a broken piece of truth. But it is time, at last, to tell the truth. Come on Monday. I will send a car to meet you from the 4:30 arrival at Harrogate Station. And that's where the story begins. Margaret Lee is whisked off to Vida Winter's home, and she is the first and only person to ever hear Vida Winter's true origin story. This is the kind of book with an ending you never see coming. It lives rent-free in my mind, and I think it will go down in history as the only book that feels like a fairy tale without actually being a fairy tale. It's shocking, it's gritty, it's engaging. I wouldn't say that the story is a happy ending, but it's not a disappointing one. It's satisfying enough to where you feel okay to close the book, but this story has never left my mind, and I don't think it ever will. The next book I want to talk about is my current favorite. This is called For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. There is a sequel, I haven't read it yet. This is technically a Red Riding Hood retelling, but it basically stops at the name Red and Wolf. Everything else is fully unique, and the style of writing that Hannah Witten does is choppy, it's sharp, it's not flowery or sludgy. It's sharp and quick and paints enough of a picture to keep you engaged, to make you feel like you're there, allow you to picture everything in your head without being muddy or feeling like sticky molasses that you just sludge your way through. The characters are so engaging. I absolutely love this retelling. Words are not going to describe my love for this book in any kind of accuracy that it's worthy of, but just trust me, you have to read this. It's sort of an enemies to lovers trope. There is so much tension. It is such a slow burn, almost painfully so, but my word, when it gets there, it feels like a dark fantasy. It reads like a beautiful love story. If we're rating things between mild yellow pepper, moderate orange pepper, and spicy red pepper, I'd say it's yellow. A lot of sweet moments, a lot of heart-thumping moments, but nothing that would warrant a red hot spice rating. If you don't pick up any other book that I mentioned, please, please, please pick this one up. It's so good. Now onto books that I don't have a physical copy for, but I have audiobook versions on my phone. The first one I'm going to talk about is called The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. I will warn you now that there is quite a bit of language in that one. If a lot of language bothers you, I completely understand. It bothers me too, but I can say the story is worth it. If you can just push through, the story is worth it. It follows a girl named Mythony Thomas. Remember when I said that I read the first sentence, the first paragraph, the first page in order to gauge whether or not I want to take a book home? The very first page of that book had me immediately downloading the audiobook. It starts off with a letter to Mythony Thomas. The actual letter is so much better than the butchered version I'm going to give you now, but it basically says, "Hi, I'm Mythony Thomas. You don't know me and you don't know who you are, but you're currently in my body and we need to chat because some things have happened and there are a few things you need to know if you're going to be parading around as me." I think the best way to describe it is a cross between the fantastical and the supernatural. Let's just say if James Bond was a real person, this organization would outrank MI6 by a country mile. They are superpowered humans who deal with superpowered phenomenons. I feel like it's pretty obvious to say that it's top secret. Only the people who need to know about it. And while the person residing in Mythony Thomas's body is trying to read all of these letters that her predecessor left behind for her, she's also trying to pretend to be Mythony Thomas and do her daily tasks, which are challenging when you have no memory of who you are or how to do your job. You basically find out that someone tried to kill Mythony Thomas, and the person residing in her body now has a choice. She can either go into hiding or she can try to solve the mystery and figure out who wants her dead. Because even though Mythony Thomas mentally is gone, the body still remains, which means she's still in danger. It's a whirlwind adventure. If I had had a physical book, I wouldn't have been able to put it down. I burned through that audiobook in a very short sitting. And it's again, one of those books that lives rent-free in my mind that I listen to on a yearly basis. I get the itch to reread it every year without fail. The next two books I'm going to mention are technically series, and these are also books that you don't have to read in chronological order, so I'll try to speak about them as a whole instead of just as a singular book. It's getting dark. Can I do... Ah, there we go. Is that better? I think I brightened it up a little bit. I don't normally film when the sun is setting, but I was coloring my hair and I have a lot of it, so it took a while. First series I'm going to talk about is by Rick Riordan. No, it is not the Percy Jackson series. How many of you thought it was? If you didn't know, he has a grown-up series involving a private eye who is sarcastic to the max, which I personally love. He's not a great human being, but he's not a hateful human being. He's the kind of person that makes kind of dumb decisions, but it sort of works out. His name is Trace Navarre. He is a bad boy extraordinaire. He's the kind of guy that would give you nightmares if he was dating your daughter, but you also sort of want to date him too. For some inexplicable reason, he always puts his nose where it doesn't belong, and it always ends him in trouble, but it comes from a good place of wanting to help and having a heart of gold under all of that gritty, snarky exterior. It's just the best kind of character, isn't it? It takes place in the heart of Texas, and you can tell the author used to live there. I don't know if he still does, but I know at one point he did. He paints a picture, names off streets and mom and pop shops and places and scenery that you wouldn't think to describe unless you've lived in a place. Honestly, I think the location is just as much of a character as Trace himself. It's funny, it's engaging, the mystery keeps you reading, or listening in my case. You either love the characters that he gives you or you hate them, and either way, it makes you want to keep reading. This book series is so underrated. I haven't found one person who has ever heard of it, and I wish more people did. I wish he had written more books, but I guess 7 was the magic number and he left you on a heck of a cliffhanger. A happy cliffhanger, but I like perfectly tied bows. I don't like any loose ends, and he gave you a couple loose ends that just really bug me, which is probably why I return to this series every year. I love Trace Navarre. He's the kind of person you can't help but love, despite all of his flaws and faults. There's language in this one as well, but not to the point where it felt overwhelming. Just so you know going in, there is some language. The next book is called A Mitchel and Markby Mystery by Anne Granger. You don't have to read this book in any kind of succession. There are two characters that are constant throughout the whole series. One is, oh my word, what's her name? This is disgraceful. How do I not remember the main character's name? Found it. Meredith Mitchell. As soon as I read it, I was like, oh yeah! Meredith Mitchell and Alan Markby. Meredith Mitchell is not a PI. She's not a detective. She's just a woman that is always in the wrong place at the right time, who has just enough curiosity to get her into all sorts of trouble. Alan Markby is her boyfriend, who is a detective, is supposed to be solving mysteries, and always seems to end up getting Meredith out of trouble. The two go head to head all the time. Why were you there? I don't know. I wasn't trying to be there. Like I said, you don't have to read it in succession, but because the two constant characters have a relationship, there is a very subtle timeline to the beginning of their relationship to where it ends. So not necessary, but might be nice if you want to see their relationship from start to finish. I highly recommend the audiobooks for this one because the setting takes place in the English Cotswolds. It's an English accent and lovely to listen to. There's always a mystery. It keeps you guessing until the very end of every book. It's a bit like Murder, She Wrote, where Meredith and Alan stay constant throughout the story, but the characters change, the settings change, but the other constant is that there's always a murder to solve. And I don't know about you, but I love a good whodunit. This one has very, very, very minimal language, if at all. I think I can remember one instance and it was a very mild word. So definitely good for people who are a little sensitive to language, but also a great whodunit series and lots to choose from. So you don't have to say goodbye to the main characters too quickly. And perfect timing, the sun has pretty much set. My loft is significantly darker than when we started this chat, and those are all the books I love enough to read on an annual basis. I hope this gives you a few more books to add to your TBR list, maybe informs you of some books you didn't know existed and now want to read. I love booktube videos. I love listening to other people talk about books that I haven't seen or heard of. I love booktube videos that discuss the up and coming new arrivals, but I really love videos that chat about underrated books, books that people have maybe never heard of or didn't get a fair shot in the publishing, or maybe other books that the author wrote outshone these ones. As a wannabe author myself, I know how I would feel if a book I worked really hard on in my early years didn't get as much recognition as the ones in my later years simply because I wasn't well known then. I'm a little bit like Margaret Lee from the 13th Tale. I feel bad for books that people don't love or don't know exist and therefore can't love. So I hope you don't mind I took a break from the vlogs and did a sit-down video today. I hope this felt like you and I were having a book chat over coffee. I do this with my friends in real life and I thought you guys might enjoy it too. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a future video from me. I upload on Wednesdays and Saturdays, both at 6 a.m. and would love for you to be part of this little online family. My goal is to get my channel monetized, which means I need 1,000 subscribers and we are less than 100 people away. Less than 100 people. That's so cool. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and let's see how big we can grow this family. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Love you guys. Mwah.